When I flew in, it was sunny, which I was really happy about because I thought in Washington it was never sunny and always cloudy and rainy. And I just remember I was called Spanish speaking. I grew up in Southern California, so I'm from an area with lots of Hispanics. In my mind, Everett, Seattle area is not really predominantly Hispanic, so I was kind of like, I don't know, I didn't like believe, I guess, that there's that many Hispanics out there. And I just remember going through the airport, like landing in Seattle and going through the airport and seeing the Hispanic families, and I was just like so happy to hear them speak Spanish to the little kids and to see that they were there, and just feel like a little bit of love for them right away. That was really cool. And then we met the mission president. Everything was really fast. It was like surreal, but kind of like less crazy than you expect it, but it's crazy because you've been imagining it for your whole life and now it's upon you. And then also, my first area was where the mission home was. So when I drove, I met my companion, and then I drove like a mile down the street, and that was my area. So that was kind of anticlimactic, but it was good. I remember my first meal I had. It was with an investigator, an older woman. She never ended up getting baptized. I didn't understand anything that was happening. I really could not understand the Spanish. The food was really good, but it was kind of, I don't know, it was different than what I was used to. I had to eat like the meat off the bone by like putting it in my mouth and like sucking the meat off and spitting the bone out, because that's what they did. And I just remember that I thought that was gross, but I decided that I would do it because I didn't want to be rude. And it was just fun for me to do that because, I don't know, everyone talks about how the mission changes you. But then in MTC, I realized that it wasn't magic. Like, nothing like magic happened. Any changes that come are like from your own decisions to work hard and to change yourself. But then on that first day, like growing up, I would have never eaten that. I would have just put it aside. But because I didn't want to offend her, I didn't want to do anything to like leave a negative impression of us or the church, I was able to do it. Even though it was just a really small thing, just eating meat, but it was good. The Everett Mission, first of all, is very, very beautiful. Just one of the prettiest places I've ever been to. And when I served there, it was from North Seattle to Canada on the western half. So on the west, you had the ocean, and on the east, you had like a mountain range where like no one lived anyways. So that was the mission. Since I've been home, a couple of new missions have been created in Washington. So I believe the Everett Mission now does not include any of Seattle proper. I believe the farthest south it goes is the city of Everett itself, and then up north all the way through Canada still. When I served, there was 11 stakes, like 10 and 11. One was created while I was out there. So there's 11 stakes. There were also, when I got out there, there were 2 Spanish-speaking branches with 5 groups. So a group met within an English ward. They weren't a separate unit. They had sacrament together with someone translating into Spanish. They usually had headphones that they could wear. And then they would, however, there was enough of them that they would do their own priesthood and relief society. But the youth were all integrated because most of the youth spoke English as well. But by the time I left, actually, there was 5 Spanish branches, I believe. So about, 3 of the groups had turned into branches, which was really cool to see. And there is a temple in Seattle. It's actually in the city of Bellevue, which is, well, when I served, that was about 10 minutes from the mission boundary, and now it's probably about 20 or 30, so it's still not very far at all. So really close, but it is outside the mission, so we only got to go twice a year to attend the temple ourselves. The church is strong in Washington, stronger than I thought it would be. The amount of members to the overall population is pretty high. Obviously the members are a minority still, but the church is strong, and it's been growing relatively fast since it was there. I know there's Scott's wife, who he talks about a lot in conference, served there. So that's kind of cool. That was where she was called to serve. It was like the Pacific Northwest Mission then. But, well, yeah. The cities of Shoreline and Linwood and Redmond and Kirkland, I believe, have all been moved into the Seattle Mission, because the Seattle Mission got cut off from the south with the addition of the Federal Way Mission. One thing that's cool about Everett is the biggest building in the world is there. In terms of cubic feet, it's the Boeing plant. Yeah, guess that's cool. Yeah, we got to do a tour when I was in Everett. It's crazy. They just have huge 747s, like 5 or 6 of them lined up that they're building inside this one huge building. And you can see most of the building, like it's not partitioned off. It's just like a big building, and it's huge. It's cool. In the mission are the San Juan Islands, which are a whole bunch of islands off of the coast that are just absolutely beautiful. Lots of people vacation out there. And there is a branch that meets out there. When I was there, it was on and off whether or not missionaries were actually serving, because there's a huge, it's like a logistical nightmare, because you have to get around by ferry. You can't, like, on a given island, you might have 2 or 3 members, and then to get to the next island might take 5 hours out of your day or more. But there is a branch out there, so that's kind of a cool part of the mission. There's lots of lighthouses along the bay. There's a cool bridge between a couple islands. There are a couple islands that have access by a bridge, and so there's like big cities on those islands, and it's really cool. It's really beautiful. There's the Cascade Mountains are in the mission. Mount Baker, I believe, has the record in the United States for the most snowfall in any winter. It's always white all year long, never melts, and really just kind of incredible how beautiful of an area it is. Everett's a really nice city. It's definitely a city. It has nicer parts and not as nice parts. Yeah, like I mentioned, Boeing is headquartered in Everett, and it's a huge company, so they have offices everywhere, but the main like corporate headquarters and where they build and test all their airplanes is in Everett itself. So around whenever Boeing has a shift change, like all the freeways get packed, just because there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people leaving there. It's kind of like BYU, where they have like all their own things, like they have their own like softball leagues and all these cool things, like this little community within its own community. That's like the big, huge economic powerhouse of Everett. Everett rains a lot. My first winter, which was spent in Everett, was pretty much pure rain from December to June. And so that was interesting. Let's see. I would say, coming from California, I would say that every area in the Everett Mission felt safe to me. However, there were parts of Everett that I know a lot of missionaries felt were kind of, they didn't necessarily feel scared to be there, but there were some things that happened when I was in Everett. I believe there were 2 shootings that killed people. So it's a city, and there's work to be done to help people find the gospel for sure. One time I was driving down Casino Road. Hopefully if you serve in Everett, you'll get to know Casino Road. It's a really great place. And a car like ran into a light pole in front of a gas station. We were just walking down the road, and then it was like really loud, and the pole fell over, and then the car like backed up and just drove away. So like, I don't know what happened, but that was really weird. And I was surprised the car wasn't hurt, but it wasn't. So yeah, Everett, I believe it has about 115,000 people, the actual city itself. Most of the other cities in the mission are smaller than that. However, like most of the cities are still cities, I'd say like 30,000+. There's a lot more Hispanics than I thought there were. They tend to live in condensed areas, so we could typically find an apartment complex, a neighborhood in the city where there was a very high concentration of Hispanics, which helped us out a lot. So that in times we were able to contact in, I guess, the old-fashioned traditional ways of door contacting or street contacting. There's a lot of them around. Most of them were from Mexico. That was by far the predominant place. There's also a lot from Peru that I met, and then there's a handful from everywhere though. I think there's only like 1 or 2 countries that speak Spanish as their main language that I didn't meet people from. So I met someone from everywhere, and most of them come to work to get a better life for their families. Lots of people in America have different opinions on immigration, but one of the things that I felt on my mission is that I was, even with these people that never wanted to listen to me, I just felt like I was dealing with a very noble group of people, because they had sacrificed a lot and made a huge risk for their families. These men and these women gave up everything on a chance to give a better life to their children, and I really respected that a lot about them. They love their families a lot, as evidenced by that, and when they come here, it's pretty rare for one of them to be there completely by themselves with all their family still in Mexico. So they definitely stick close with their families. Usually everyone has brothers or sisters or cousins that they know. And in almost all cases, they either live in the same city or like the next city over. They all live close by. And so that was fun to meet one member or one investigator, and then pretty soon that can lead to like 10 or 20 people that you can meet and potentially teach. So that was cool. Hispanics are very giving, very, very giving. People would argue with us sometimes about like doctrine or why we were wrong, and then we would say, all right, well, have a good day. And then they'd be like, hey, like take these 5 fruits, or like, here, let me give you a hamburger, or like, here, have a piece of the steak that I'm making. Just super nice and super giving. Really taught me a lot about how you can choose to give no matter what, because a lot of them weren't too well off in terms of worldly possessions, but they were always giving to the missionaries and to their neighbors. Common jobs were agriculture. They worked a lot in the food industry, like usually being the cook or the dishwasher. A lot of them worked in construction, which was on and off. Sometimes it was really good. Sometimes construction was slow and that was hard. Let's see, one common problem was getting them to church, because a lot of them did work on Sundays because they were willing. They were here to work and provide for their families, and so lots of times maybe Sunday is the day that most people want off, and so they were willing to work, and which maybe in lots of cases helped them get the job in the first place. So that was difficult. Another reason that getting people to church was hard is because a lot of them didn't have their own vehicle sometimes, and so you had to try and arrange a ride, which is good if you can, because then they get to know a member better, but sometimes it's really hard because some of the branches are small and there's not as many members as you might think there would be in a normal ward in the United States, and so getting members to come pick them up can be a challenge. If you've been called to serve and you're going to serve in the Everett Mission, or any mission really, just make sure you talk to everyone you see. That was something I always wanted to do. I knew that it was the right thing to do, but I was afraid to do it because, like I said, I was afraid of people and I didn't have very good people skills. Anyways, I had been serving in Everett for about 4 transfers, so a really long time. And we had a lot of people that we had taught and very little success in terms of actually bringing them to be members in the church. Transfers came and I stayed, and I got a new companion, and this companion of mine talked with everyone. Both of us were coming from kind of a hard previous transfers where we didn't see very much success. Maybe we had not made the best decisions, but we were determined that this transfer, with this new opportunity, we were going to try harder. And this companion of mine just talked with everyone. We were walking down Casino Road, which is a pretty big road. It's not a residential street. And if we were walking down the road and there was someone on the other side of the street, he would run across the street and talk to them, which at first I was like, is that even okay? Like, we're breaking the law to run across the street. But he would talk with them. He wouldn't let anyone go by. And then if we were one time we were in a parking lot and we noticed that there was a guy in the car, just like sitting, I don't know what he was doing, getting ready to go. And as we walked over there, he like rolled his window up. So like, I don't think he wanted to talk to us, but my companion went up and just knocked on his window. And he's like, hey, like, please roll your window down. And he did, and we talked to him, and like nothing happened. But with him, he wasn't interested, which is fine. But my companion just talked with everyone. After a while, I caught fire. We were talking with everyone we saw. And that transfer alone, I just can't tell you how many miracles we saw. And so many people ended up getting baptized. So many investigators that we had worked with for a long time suddenly were interested in making commitments that they weren't making before. We're finding people all over the place, and it was just a huge testimony builder to me that if you're willing to do what the Lord asks you to do, that blessings will follow. So definitely talk to everyone you see. Just do it. I was the 3rd missionary in my family. My brother got called to Spain, then I had a sister get called to Ohio, and then it was me submitting my papers. And I'll be honest, I really wanted to go foreign. It just sounded really fun. It also sounded easier for me to love the people. I don't know why, but it just seemed like when you go foreign, they're like so different from you culturally, language, and all these things, that it seems like it might be easier to love these people. It's kind of like your mission is like a different life kind of than what you've grown up with. And so I opened my call, and I was called to Everett, Washington, Spanish speaking. So I was really excited to serve and to learn Spanish, but I was a little disappointed to go stateside. And it was fine. Like I never had any doubt about whether or not I would accept the call. Like I was super excited still to serve a mission. But I was a little disappointed, and it was really humbling for me because when I realized that my heart wasn't in the right place. I realized that going into my mission, I hoped to get a little bit out of it for myself as well, rather than going into it hoping only to serve. Because if you believe in the gospel, then you believe that everyone on this earth is God's child. So as long as you're called to this earth where there's human beings, your mission is the same, and you have the opportunity to serve. So that was humbling, and I realized that was an area of my life that I needed to grow. And like I said, going out, and even though I was Spanish speaking, when we were out on the streets, like we would contact the Americans as well, of course. And so we got to interact with lots of Americans as well. And it was really enjoyable to be able to speak with people that in every aspect of their lives were pretty much like the same as me, other than religion. And it was really nice to be able to share with them something that I believed. I also believe that if you look in the New Testament, you see that Christ was actually called to teach his own people. He wasn't called to preach to the Greeks and all the Egyptians. He was called to speak to the house of Israel. And so it's really special to be able to be amongst your own people and to share the gospel with them. It's the same wherever you go, and you really do learn to love the people. And as far as like if you're hoping for crazy experiences, I can promise you you'll get plenty of crazy experiences, more than you want, even in Everett, so don't worry about that at all. Yeah, too much. So the gospel really changes lives, and with one of the families that I was able to teach, they ended up getting baptized, and it's just incredible to see how converted to the gospel they are. In a lot of ways, I would consider them to be way more converted than I am. And after I had been home for quite a while, she put on Facebook this convert experience she had where she was worried about paying tithing because they had lost their job and times were getting really tough. They had like kind of run through their savings and things were looking really bad, and they were deciding whether or not they should pay their tithing, and she decided that she would, even though she'd only been a member, for like, I think it was about a year at that point, but still, that's not very long. And after they decided to pay their tithing, I don't know all the details, but they got a check in the mail that was for like several $1,000s, and with that money they ended up actually opening a Mexican food restaurant in Everett. If you go to Everett, you should find out who I'm talking about and go to this restaurant. And just her testimony, she was so excited about it herself that she couldn't help but to post it on Facebook. She was so excited about seeing how when she followed the commandments that she would be blessed. There was a man we started teaching named Carlos, and he actually was here by himself. His wife and I believe he had 3 daughters who were back home in Mexico, were waiting for him to come back to Mexico. His plan originally was to come here, work really hard, and save up a bunch of money to buy a house in Mexico, and then move back and kind of spend the rest of his life there with his family. And he came to the United States. He found a job. At one point, he was working 3 jobs and sleeping 2 hours a day. 7 days a week he was working, and he only had 2 hours a day that he could sleep. He did that for several months, which is just insane. I don't know how anyone could do that. But he was working, and and he was sending his money to a bank back in Mexico, waiting it to grow until he had enough to buy a house. And I believe he worked for 10 years, and after 10 years he had enough money saved up to buy a house. And so when he called up his bank to kind of make plans, let them know that he's going to be coming back soon so he could withdraw the money, he found out that there was no money there. And what had happened, according to him at least, and I believe him, was just that someone in the bank had been taking his money all these years. In Mexico, apparently there's a lot of corruption, and that's not just in the government, but it can be in private industries as well. And basically he just lost all his money. And so he was super super upset, as you can imagine. 10 years of his life were just kind of taken away from him. And when we met him, it had been about 5 years since then, because he had decided to he wasn't sure what to do at first, but he decided to stay and keep working in order to pay for his house again, like just pay for 2 houses basically, because he lost the one. Yeah, I don't know why I said that, but I just couldn't believe how sad that was, because there were problems associated with being away from their family. Sometimes some of the males especially would be tempted to do improper things with regards to chastity after having been away from their spouse for several years on end. And it's just really, really hard on everyone involved to be that far away from your family. And so that was just an incredible situation. And it kind of prepared him, I think, to really humble himself and be willing to listen to what we had to share. Okay, it would be menudo, which is a soup where the main part, like the main meat in the soup, is cow intestine. It's really gross, doesn't even look like meat. And they also have pata, or like hoof of a cow in there, and there's nothing there except cartilage, and the idea is to eat the cartilage off of the meat. Yeah, we met a really crazy guy who knew a lot about the church. Like, he was quoting the Pearl of Great Price and other things to us, but he had told us about all the times when he had met the Savior, and he knew how many kids Christ had, and he had also been with John the Beloved, and he believed that there were like several alien races that were living on the earth, and that the government knew all about it, but they wouldn't like tell us to keep us afraid, or to keep us from getting afraid. And he was crazy. It was one of those situations where as soon as we got there, we just wanted to leave, but like we couldn't get a word in edgewise because he just kept on telling us. And then we didn't want to leave because we found out how crazy and fun it was. Yeah. I felt the Spirit strongly when I worked with an investigator. I got to work with her for over 6 months, and I always thought she was going to get baptized from the very beginning, and then she kept on saying no to the invitation, and I wasn't ever sure why. But long story short, this isn't really story time, but she ended up getting baptized after I'd worked with her for over 6 months. And just being at her baptism was a very spiritual experience. Just the love you feel for someone after putting everything you have for that person for that long. It was just incredible to feel the Lord's love for her, and to feel your own love for that person, to see them make such an important step in their life. Definitely brought the Spirit. Yeah, in my second transfer, I was relating to an investigator how at another investigator's house, we were cutting wood for them to get ready for the coming winter. And instead of saying winter, which is invierno, I said infierno, which means hell. And so I said that we were cutting wood to like get ready to stoke the fire for hell. So. Probably the greatest lesson I learned was that the atonement is real. I think I'll talk about that more when I talk about hard stuff. I learned the atonement is real, and probably the second greatest thing I learned was to love people, and just what a difference everything about life is different when you love those that are around you. It's completely different. For me, it was just people skills. I was really shy. I'm still not great at it. I get shy around people. I'm like clumsy. I stumble with my words. But for my mission, I had to, and I had the opportunity to lead out in teaching and lead out in contacting for a lot of my mission. And I learned to talk with people and to bring up awkward subjects and to just make the most of everything. Probably just rain for 6 months, like just rain and clouds for over 6 months. It snowed twice on my mission, and it was cold. It was like 5 degrees the next day, but that was like 2 days long, and then it was warm again. So I don't know. It's probably more extreme was how long it rained, just like 6 months straight. It's crazy. The hardest thing for me was when I felt like I had really messed up, and I felt like some choices I had made had influenced an investigator's decision to stop investigating the gospel. And there's like a couple of very specific things that I felt like the Spirit had prompted me to do or not do that I hadn't listened to. So that was really hard, because all of a sudden I felt like I had the weight of a soul on my shoulders. And like, how do you go on from there? How can you live with yourself? How can you do anything knowing that you were a negative influence on someone's life in such a profound way? But like I said just a couple seconds ago, it was then that I really learned how important the atonement is. And I really learned that even for pretty major mistakes, that you can be forgiven, and that you can keep going and actually accomplish a whole lot of good, despite whatever you've done wrong in the past. And that is what I would say is the most life-changing experience I had, learning about that. So yeah, the hardest thing was making mistakes that really mattered, and hurt people around you. I would say study, preach my gospel, know that back and forth, and then just be a missionary now. If you don't have a testimony, gain one. If you do have a testimony, then become converted and learn to live the gospel and to obey all the commandments. Get to work, find something to do to be productive. If there's nothing going on, that's the worst, because you're so used to doing so many things. So whether it's school or just a normal job, find something to do to be productive. I would say do right and keep in contact with as many missionaries and investigators and converts and members as you can. Don't let those relationships die. And yeah, I'd say that's pretty much it, actually, as far as my advice. It's good. Life after the mission is good. You've learned a lot, and so now you can put it in practice. So hands down, the mission was the most life-changing event of my life, and it means more to me than just about anything. I'm really grateful that the Lord let me serve a mission and let me have that opportunity to really do things that I wasn't qualified for, and to participate in the work of bringing souls unto Christ. I do know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is true. It is God's church. It is His work. And when you're on your mission, it will become, if you don't know already, it will become completely apparent to you. There's no doubt in my mind, after serving a mission and after feeling the feelings that I felt and seeing other people feel those same feelings and change their lives, that it's true. Jesus Christ is real. The atonement is real. Everything we talk about in church, so many things that you can't touch with your hands, that you kind of believe or hope to believe in, after the mission, you can feel it. It's all real. And I also wanted to let you know that the Book of Mormon is true, and what Joseph Smith said about it is right, when he said that a man will get nearer to God by abiding by its precepts than by any other book. So if you have opportunity to invite investigators, if you want them to change their lives, then get them to read the Book of Mormon, because as they do it, the Spirit will touch their hearts, and they will change their lives. So I know that it's true. I know that God loves all of His children, and the love that He has for them is something that we can't fully feel, but on the mission, I was able to feel a lot more of it than I ever had before, and I'm sure that you will too. Give it your all when you go out there. It's very short. I should say that. It goes by so much faster than you think it will. So don't waste a single day. Hit the ground running when you get out there. Talk with everyone. Keep the rules. And above all, love God, and love everyone that you see, and you're in for a blessing. I wish I could go back. I know everyone says that, I think, but if I had the opportunity to serve a mission again, I really would. And so make the most of it.
The transition from normal life to the MTC was actually easier for me than going from the MTC to the mission field. And this is something we're trying to work on at the MTC, is making the experience really realistic. Because my experience in the MTC was so elevating, incredible, inspiring, and, stories of just families, accepting the gospel, being baptized, sealed, just incredible things that really built my faith. But I guess I didn't refine my faith in the MTC. So when I got to the field and we didn't have any investigators, I was like, what's going on? You know, like I thought we were just supposed to be teaching and there's probably a family getting baptized this weekend. And I was just, here to kind of join the wave and just, so that was hard for me. And in fact, I had, set incredibly high goals for myself that really became burdens. And I actually really felt overwhelmed for the first few months. And I talked to my mission president, and we had this incredible experience in an interview in which he told me he was trying to explain the success of a missionary, even opened up Preach My Gospel, and it was good and helpful, but I was just really struggling again with I'm not being successful because, I have this goal for baptisms and we're not at the rate even close to where we should be, after a couple months. I'd only seen one person be baptized, and he told me that your desires, and he felt this by the Spirit, he said, your desires are the Lord's desires. The Lord has the goal to baptize and help every single person on earth. And obviously we don't go as drastic to say that I'm going to baptize, 10,000 people because that's how many people are in my areas, but rather we go to the extent of never limiting ourselves, because the Lord definitely doesn't. And that changed everything for me. But yeah, I definitely felt very inadequate those first couple weeks in the field. I felt very discouraged, alone, nervous. It was hard. It was hard, but had I been able to see how my mission was going to play out, I would have been patient. I would have been okay with my progress day by day. And I would have turned to the Lord and just sought for help that day and trusted in Him, because my mission now, I couldn't have asked for a better mission. So it was a good transition, but it was hard. And so I just encourage you to be patient as you transition to the field. One thing that was hard for me specifically about Washington is it's very rainy. And I'm a sun guy, and there was a lot of black crows everywhere. If you ever serve in Seattle or around that area, which I did in my first area, you'll know what I'm saying. There's a lot of crows, dark and kind of and at first I was like, what is this place? But after a couple weeks and a month or two, it really grows on you, and you actually come to like everything about it. And yeah, I kind of miss the rainy days now. I love it. So the actual city of Everett is, what would I compare it to? Kind of has the California feel. No, I mean kind of like the city, not like downtown LA, big buildings, but it's more of the city, a lot of apartments, a lot of people, and obviously a lot of people work at Boeing. That's one of the main employers there in Everett. I actually never served in the city of Everett. I went there and stayed there during the last week of my mission when my family came and picked me up. We stayed in a hotel there. But just very cultural. There's a very good cultural blend. You've got a lot of Asian people. You've got a lot of Hispanic people. In fact, in some areas in Everett, Washington, more down in the Kirkland, Redmond area, there's actually a lot of Indian people as well that work for Microsoft. The cities are drastically different in the mission. Mount Vernon, which is up north, about an hour south of the border, is about 70, no, not 70. That's probably the highest estimate I've heard, but I've heard anywhere from 30 to 70% Hispanic. It feels like 90 because all the people you see walking on the streets are Hispanics. They love to walk and get out and be social. And all the white people are just driving in their cars. So that's kind of cool. And that area is actually very open. A lot of fields, a lot of farming, agriculture, stuff like that. Whereas Everett and going down into Shoreline or even Linwood is just very industrialized, very city-like, very, a lot of apartments. You can hardly ever find a place where there's an open field. But up in Mount Vernon and even in Marysville, you get a lot of open fields. So that's kind of the feel. And down in Kirkland, Redmond's a wealthier area. You've got very nice, beautiful trees that just line the streets, very well kept. Everett's a little bit more of the city feel, a little more, you get a little dirty a little bit. So I guess it just varies according to what city you're in. Man, so when you first get to the mission, the Everett Washington mission, at least our mission president had us watch this slideshow, and it was like Washington history. I totally should have paid attention. I did not. I actually went a few more times as I trained. I would go back, and the trainers would watch it as well. A few things, like obviously, like, you know, drastic events, I guess you could say. Mount St. Helens, that's in Washington. That's in the Tacoma mission. So that's 2 missions down from Everett, but that volcano eruption occurred, and that was a big deal. It's known for its seafood. I mean, there's tons of harbors and stuff like that, and so that's something that's very unique about Washington. It's the only state named after a U.S. president. So that's kind of cool. I'm trying to like race my memory to think. I know that the church, obviously it came, like the pioneers obviously went to Utah originally, and some to California, Nevada, different areas, Arizona, but from Utah, some then continued on to Washington. And it kind of started small. In fact, Washington was always kind of small until Seattle became like this big harbor for shipping going from anywhere along the West Coast, even to some of the islands. So, yeah, I wish I knew more about the history of my state. It's a beautiful state. I love it. But I definitely would like to learn more. Well, there's not like very many extremes in weather in Washington. In the summer, it'll get to like maybe 90 high. And it's humid, so it'll feel hot, especially because you're used to like 70. In the winter, it'll be about 50 most of the time. In the summer, you'll probably get 70% sun and 20% overcast, 10% rain. And so it's beautiful. Like, everyone that's ever touched foot in Washington in the summer knows that there's no better place to live. It's cool, it's crisp, it's blue skies, green trees everywhere, bright yellow sun, fresh, vibrant. It's incredible, incredible. In the winter, you'll probably get the reverse. You'll get about 70% rain, 20% overcast, and 10% sun. So every 10 days or so, you'll get just this bluebird day, and those are the best days because it's still, I mean, it's not that cold, maybe 60s, 50s, bright blue skies, green trees everywhere. So those are incredible, and those keep you going. There's no better place for sunsets. They're incredible because of all the clouds. You'll get incredible sunsets there. As well, you'll get amazing cloud formations. I would stop all the time just walking on the street and just look up. I was a little stressed or something, I would just say, oh my goodness, this is incredible. Like, we live right now in Washington in such a beautiful place. And besides that, the greenery is incredible there. I mean, I wouldn't pass that up for anything. It snowed twice during my whole mission, so not much snow. And when it did snow, it was so... it stunk because it was Sunday, and we wake up to like an inch or two of snow, and that was the day that we had so many investigators that committed to come, and members like ready to give them rides and stuff, and they canceled church. And we were like so bummed, and like we go out and start working, and we see like another church that's like got people going to it, and we're like, just frustrated. So I mean, that was about as extreme as it got. It got, yeah, like I said, 90s in the summers, but very, very temperate, very relaxing, calming. Most people in Washington are usually very calm because of the weather. I mean, it has this kind of calming effect on people. So the nature kind of setup of Washington is pine trees, evergreen trees everywhere, and they will be so tall. I think I've seen one that's been up to, if not maybe more than 100 feet tall. Just incredibly tall, just huge volume. What's the word? I'm thinking in Spanish now. Voluminoso, just like big voluminous. But they're huge, And they'll get so tall and they'll line the streets. So you'll be on the freeway and you'll be going 65 and like you'll have like just a wall of pine trees. Just you can't even like see like around you at all, and it's just beautiful. There's amazing hikes, incredible hikes. Went on a lot of hikes on my mission. There's obviously you've got like the ocean and rivers and lakes that lead into the ocean, so there's a lot of opportunities to go and visit bodies of water. And I guess for wildlife, I mean, there's nothing too specific except Bigfoot. Definitely the most claims to having seen Bigfoot are in Washington, northern Washington, and southern Canada, right in that area, the Northwest. So if you're a Bigfoot hunter, congrats. If you go to Washington, because you might find them. I didn't ever see, and I didn't ever hear of any like specific wildlife. I mean, we saw a few wolves, or I don't know, but those were like very few and far in between and very small and nothing dangerous. A few black bears. Yeah, I don't think there was deer, quite a few deer, but I don't know, it wasn't any like extreme overpopulation of animals or anything like that. Deception Pass. It's up by Mount Vernon, which is about an hour south of the Canadian border. You drive out onto this island, and there's a bridge between there's a couple islands. So you drive onto this island, you go over this bridge first, and then you go onto what's called Oak Harbor, Whigby Island. And as you come onto Whigby Island, there's this huge bridge. I think it's 200 feet tall, and it's over just the huge gulf that kind of flows into the it's not the ocean, is it? Shoot, I'm forgetting the bay there. Is it I think it's the Sound. Yeah, the Puget Sound. There we go. And so it flows into there. It's just this beautiful color. It's kind of like this green turquoise, and you can hike all the way down to by like this big gulf/river thing, and like skip stones. It's just a beautiful sight from up there on the bridge. As well, there's the Boeing factory in Everett, Washington, the actual city. That's Boeing's plant. It's the largest building in the entire world, area-wise. And it actually is so big that before they had good ventilation, I know this sounds crazy, but it's legit, they actually had its own weather inside the building. It rained a few times, and I've heard of one story where it actually kind of snowed. Yeah, and so now obviously it doesn't happen because they have the ventilation and stuff, but it's that big. So that is a favorite to go to if you go to the Everett Washington Mission. Washington in general has like a lot of cool places to see, especially down by Seattle. There's Pike's Market, where they throw the fish around. That's the classic. You see that in movies and stuff. As well, they have the gum wall. That's right there in that marketplace where people just put gum and it's just like plastered. They have this famous golden pig there that you can like get on top of and take pictures. That's kind of fun, and it's just amazing market. So, but that's outside of my mission. I went there after my mission when my parents came and picked me up. There's also incredible lakes. Lake Washington is beautiful. I would highly encourage going there, and you can skip stones and just look for seashells and stuff. It's really pretty. And that's more down by Kirkland and Redmond area. And there's just hikes wherever you want. I mean, there's not any names that specifically come to mind, but wherever you are in Washington, you should be able to find a good hike. Food. Well, first I'll just touch on Washington in general. Such good teriyaki. You'll find so many teriyaki restaurants. Just incredible teriyaki. So that was where we ate a lot on P days and different days. The restaurants there are very good. There's down by Pike's Place in Seattle. There's the Crab Shack, I think it is. I can't remember the exact name, but it's hard to miss. It's like the main seafood place down in Seattle. It's incredible food. yeah, you'll get a lot of seafood, great sushi, stuff like that. Specifically for me, being a Spanish-speaking missionary, I ate about 90% of the food I ate, besides like breakfast and stuff, was obviously Mexican and Hispanic food. Loved it so much. Pozole, I mean, that was probably one of my favorite dishes. Just this big old bowl of hominy is what they call it. It's like these big white pieces of corn, but it's not really like corn. It almost tastes more like a potato. So they'll have that in salsa, and you put some chips and stuff on top. I also loved tacos de lengua, tongue tacos. You get those at, there's tons of puestos de tacos, or little taco stands all around. The members there feed you really well, at least in the Hispanic areas. We almost ate every night. Some things that were kind of hard for me to eat was menudo. It's cow's stomach that they put into like a soup. I would just try and get a tortilla and put a little piece in the middle and just kind of like, absorb it in the tortilla so I couldn't taste it at all. So that was a little, definitely more on the difficult side of things. Probably the worst thing I had to eat was this one time. So there's what's called chicharrón, which is pig skin, and there's chicharrón frito, which is like they have in bags, and it's like chips, and it's like, I don't know, it's not bad. I can handle it. This one time we had chicharrón hervido, which was like boiled pig skin. So I mean, it was just straight up boiled pig skin. They put some sauce on top of it, and it was okay. It kind of felt like this like weird kind of stale jelly, like Jello taste. So if you can imagine, like if you left a plate of Jello out for a couple days and it gets that little hard film and kind of that, you know what I'm talking about. But the worst part was this one member, she's hilarious. She's like, "Hey, Elder Marsden, look at this." And she flips over a piece, and it's like of the mom's stomach, and it's got like 3 or 4 nipples on it. And I was just like, oh no. And like, she just like totally took a bite and ate it. And I was like, oh. So I didn't actually eat that piece, but I definitely ate the chicharrón. I just say, just enjoy the food, because like you come back and you're just a poor college kid, and it's like, you just don't have that anymore. So eat well, don't worry about your weight. I mean, I gained about 20 pounds on my mission and lost pretty much all of it just coming home and just not having that food anymore, and staying obviously fit and exercising, but more than anything, I just take advantage. It's good stuff. This story is like really special to me. This was in my 3rd area. I'd been out on my mission for a little over a year, and we got a call from some missionaries in an adjacent area, and they said, "Hey, we're teaching a lady here. She's got a sister in your area that's going through and has some health problems, has a cyst, and it's just getting very painful, and it could actually get infected, and she needs a surgery, but no one's willing to do it, and she was wondering if you would go over and give her a blessing." So we went over and gave her a blessing, and I remember she sat us down, and she's just like sits down and goes, "I'm a Catholic," and yeah, that's it. So don't really try and talk to me about the gospel. And we're like, okay, like, yeah, tell us a little bit about why you're Catholic. And so she starts going off, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, she just kind of opens up her life and tells us a lot about her past and some stuff, some tough things that she had experienced in the past. And it was really good for her to just kind of express some things. And then we gave her the blessing, and we left. We had another member with us, and he was like, I think you need to stick with this lady. And so we set up a return appointment, obviously, and came back when her husband was there and some of her friends, and we taught them. And like from that moment when we taught them, I just knew that I was sent to Washington to help this family. And it was, little did I know, it was going to be the next like most roller coaster like experience with this family than I would have like almost with any other family during my mission. We started teaching them, and they just caught on like really well, especially the husband. And he knelt down one time and said, I can't wait to be a member of this church, as he was saying to God. And the wife was very open, but she just had so many doubts, and they ran into just a bunch of anti-material. One of their friends who was Catholic just came over and had this book about Mormonism 101 that was just like, here you go, all the bad stuff ever about any person that's ever been a part of the church, go. And that was so hard on me because I was frustrated, they're progressing, and then they took this huge step back. And we had this lesson, and the friend was over there too, and he was debating with us about polygamy, and I was just like, the Spirit's not here, this is not helping. And it was so hard. We just started a fast right then because she called us up after that lesson and just said, hey, I don't know if I really want to meet with you guys anymore. And we started a fast because I knew I was not giving up on this family no matter what, ever. And we started a fast, and it was just really still hard on them. They were still struggling a lot with her health was bad, but eventually it kind of calmed down, that whole thing with the anti-material, and then kind of her health problem took over, and she was in a lot of pain. Couldn't find anyone to do surgery for her, so we prayed and fasted and with her and her family, and they eventually found a place that would do it for free. In fact, just a big charity deal going on, and it was incredible. We were so excited, and turns out the day of her surgery, they call her up and say, oh, by the way, you've got to put like a $2,000 down payment down. And I remember she called us and just so nervous and so vulnerable and just asking, what do I do? And I just told her, let's kneel down. After we hang up, let's both kneel down and just pray. We've fasted. We've done what we can. And we did. We knelt down, and she calls me up a few hours later saying that the doctor has decided to waive the fee and they're going to be able to do the surgery. That was so amazing. So she had that, and that was incredible to see this physical healing. But she still needed her spiritual healing. She came out of that doing a lot better and started coming to church weekly with her husband and her daughter. And she had such a big problem with Joseph Smith and polygamy, and it was cancerous. I mean, she was, in Relief Society turning to members and saying, this is just a bunch of baloney. This isn't a true prophet of God. What are we learning here? But she really, I don't know what kept her coming, honestly. And I remember a recent convert that was her friend came up and said, yeah, Alejandra is just like bashing the church, and I don't like the way it makes me feel. I've just been baptized into this church. It's starting to make me question things. Just want to let you know. And so I came away from that with this fire in my heart, Alejandra, what are you doing? And so we were tracting later that day, and I was just pounding doors, walking fast, just because that's what I do when I get stressed. I just work harder. And I remember I was walking up the stairs, and I was just prompted to ask a question. Why? Why does she have a problem with Joseph Smith and polygamy? Why? What in her life has made her experience that? And it felt like pure intelligence just dropped in to my whole being as I understood and felt that some things in the past with past relationships. And so I felt that I really needed to go approach her about this subject of some past relationships that had caused so much resentment and grudge that was harboring in her heart. And so prayed a lot. And, I remember one time looking in the mirror and just saying, I honestly would lay down my life. I would die for this family to receive the gospel. And I said that with all honesty and sincerity of my heart. And I knew it was true as I looked at myself in the mirror. And it was almost frightening because it was so true. But that enabled me to be an instrument in the Lord's hands. That willingness, that desire, that fire within me to help them. And so one day we had planned to meet with them, and I was sick, and I didn't feel good at all, but I decided that, this is just saying no, so I'm just going to go, and we're going to still meet, and I'm still going to just have this talk with her. And so her husband wasn't there. We met out on her front porch, and I just got right down to business because I had told her there was something I wanted to talk about. And so I looked her in the eye and I said, hermana, like, you have problems with Joseph Smith and polygamy. I know this is going to sound crazy, but you have had relationships in the past where there's been infidelity, there's been adultery and stuff like that, and that is why you feel so opposed to just the idea of one man ever associating with more than one woman, correct? And she just looks at me and almost like shocked at first. And then she's like, have you studied my life? And I said, no, I haven't at all. The Lord has told me this, and I need to tell you. And she had to go in the back room for about 5 to 10 minutes and just kind of cry and let things out for a little bit. And then she comes back very humble and submissive and says, what can I do to overcome those feelings? Because they definitely are there. And so we had brought a talk about repentance and what it means to truly repent. We talked about that, and she committed to kneel down that night and to ask God for forgiveness for those grudge and that feelings, and to herself forgive those wrongs that had been committed against her. And she did. And from that point on, she was ready. She was so willing to do anything, wanted to get baptized, wanted to be cleansed. Her husband was a little slower and took his time. And I left the area, and I was just so nervous. Not nervous, but obviously like trusted in the Lord, but left the area without them being baptized, and being the senior companion, just barely training this greenie, and just hoping that the Lord would send someone that would help them. And he did. He sent an incredible missionary that was able to help them. And about 5 weeks later, in my next area, I got a phone call saying that Alejandra, Carlos, and Angela, the daughter, were going to be baptized, and they wanted me to come down and be a part of that. And it was honestly the most incredible experience of my life. In fact, it marks a year this coming Saturday that they've been baptized. And they're taking the temple classes. They're active. Alejandra's one of her good friends just got baptized last weekend, and Carlos, the husband of Alejandra, baptized this lady. They're preparing, to go and be sealed as a family. So, if anything, I just want you to know, whoever you are, wherever you are, that this is real, authentic stuff that happens in Washington, that happens in Mexico, that happens in Argentina, that happens in anywhere in the world that you serve. People get baptized. People accept the gospel. People change their lives. People overcome doubts, fears, concerns. People prepare to go to the temple. People stay active. This work is real. No unhallowed hand can stop this work in any way. I know that to be true. I love that family, and I love every family and person I worked with on my mission. And I would give my life for them. And I can say that from the bottom of my heart because they mean so much to me. Another story, I guess, that comes to mind about the importance of obeying. I got to my mission. I didn't know that it was a rule that you're supposed to have another male in the home with you when you teach a single sister. And so I guess that just kind of, I don't know, didn't get passed along as clear. I just didn't understand it, or the companions that I was with, we didn't follow it. And I realized and I learned that rule, and I felt the importance of it. And I was like, oh man, we're teaching like 6 or 7 single ladies, and the only times they can meet are these times when no other members can come. Like, how is this going to work? What about the members that feed us that are just single sisters? And so I had a lot of questions, but I decided to obey. And one sister that's single that, we usually would eat with, just when with her there, she calls us up saying, hey, you still going to come over for dinner? We're like, yeah, just to let you know, hermana, we've got to make sure that there's another guy there. She's like, okay, I'll see what I can do. We get there, and she's like, so no one else is here but my son, and he's 30. He's actually a member, but he's less active, and he's in his room, and he really doesn't want to come out, and I think he's just watching TV and kind of asleep. So I mean, you can come in, right? And me and my companion look at each other and we're like, can we go talk to him and just see if he'd love to come out? And she's like, yeah. And so she goes, and he's like, okay, he'll see what you guys have to say. So we went in, very less active, very struggling at that point of his life, a lot. And we just invited him to come out and eat with us. And we just did it with a positive attitude. He came out, ate with us. It was beautiful. He was not inactive. He wasn't less active. He was inactive. I don't even know if you could even attach the word active to his name. He was so far from active. It was crazy. But he started eating with us. He started meeting with us when we'd go over. And before you know it, he's coming to church every week. He receives the Aaronic priesthood, which he never received after his baptism. Starts preparing to help his daughter be baptized. It was just a beautiful experience. And I love him so much. And so your efforts to obey are always rewarded. And success with less actives is just as important as success with non-members. The first one that came to my mind is kind of a funny story, just to realize that missionary work isn't, robotic, go, teach, lessons, baptize. It's not like that at all. It's very personable. You're a person teaching people. You're a son of God teaching other children of God, or you're a daughter of God teaching other children of God. And so I just keep in mind that, like, sometimes it's totally fine and to laugh with your investigators, to have a good time when it's appropriate. I mean, you're not going to be telling the first vision and laughing. Obviously, that's not what you do. But I remember we were teaching this investigator of ours in my first area. His name was Alfredo. He was this 26-year-old Hispanic guy, and just amazing. And he was overcoming some issues with drugs and stuff. And I remember we invited him to have a baptismal date, and he said he would, and he was doing pretty well. He knew that drugs were bad, but we hadn't quite taught him the whole word of wisdom. So we're like, okay, so we're going to teach him the word of wisdom. We're going to start from, like, the high stuff that he totally agrees with, because we knew he smoked still and had, like, drank coffee and tea and stuff. So we'll start with the high stuff like drugs and alcohol, and we know he's against that, and then we'll kind of, like, work our way down. And he's just a funny guy, and so we were teaching him, and we're like, okay, so, like, this word of wisdom, after we taught, like, why it's important, we said, include specifically a few things we avoid, being any harmful drugs. And he's like, oh yeah, for sure, no problem, I don't want to do that. Alcohol, he's like, okay, yeah, I think that's bad for you. We're like, smoking, he's like, oh, I thought you might say that. I smoke like a couple cigarettes a day, but I'm totally willing to give that up. And we're like, yeah, nice. He's like, hey, is that it? And we're like, coffee. And he's like, no, dang it. He's like, I can't believe that. But I'm totally willing. He was totally willing, which is so cool. But he was just like, and what else? And we're like, tea. And he's like, no, I love green tea so much. But it was funny just because we were laughing about it. It just like how and he just kept asking, is there anything else? Are you sure? But the willingness of this man was just so incredible, because regardless of what he wanted or what his physical body wanted, he always put God first, and he still does. Incredible. And was able to see him get baptized. It was a beautiful experience. And just a piece of advice for any missionary in any circumstance, whether it's the MTC or the field. I just learned something very powerful as a missionary. Satan will attempt to pull you away from the present. He will do everything in his power to make you look back. Look back at the fun times you had before your mission. Maybe look back upon the sad or the hard times before your mission and feel regret. He'll try to make you look back and feel remorse and sorrow and missing your family. So many things as you look back. As well, he will always try and pull you forward too. Doesn't matter if you've been in the field for a week or if you've been in the field for 100 weeks. I promise you that he will always try and get you to think about how long you still have to go. Whether it's a year and 8 months, or it's 18 days. It will feel long if you dwell on it. So my advice and encouragement is to just recognize that is not God helping you to think back, and it's not God helping you to think forward. God wants you to live in the present. wherever you are, to appreciate what's around you, to love in the moment the person that you're with. Obviously, that doesn't mean to just go around and not be prepared for anything. You prepare every day. But when you're preparing, that's what you're doing. When you're eating, that's what you're doing. That's what you're loving. When you're washing the dishes, hey, the water's warm and it feels good on my hands. I don't know. You just got to find ways to always stay in the moment. And I promise you, if you do, that you'll feel much more peaceful about where you're at as a missionary. Stay in the middle, as President Uchtdorf would say. I, on my mission, felt that I was called there to love the people, and through that love and obviously teaching by the Spirit, I could help them come into Christ. And I realized as I was reading in Moroni 7 one day in my personal study, that it says, and it hit me in Spanish, because reading the scriptures in Spanish, the phrase goes that La caridad nunca deja de ser, which means never ceases or never stops existing or being. And that's different than the phrase in English, which is never faileth. I thought that meant that in any situation you love and the outcome is always success, which that definitely applies. But the idea is that if we have charity and pure love of Jesus Christ, it never ceases. And so I kneeled down that night and I promised Heavenly Father that any of His children that He entrusted in my care, that I would never lose contact on my part. Of course, there are some people that I haven't had contact with for a few months, not because I don't try, but because they moved, or I'm still trying to find them on Facebook and their cell phone numbers changed, and they're not active, which is really unfortunate. But even that, I know I'll never give up on those people. And specifically with one lady in my mission, I prayed and I told the Lord that I knew that I was called to meet her and to help her and her husband and their family, because they were going through so many problems. And I received kind of this answer that I was not going to be, maybe it wasn't as clear as now I can see, but at the time it definitely felt that you have been called not to just be here with them for a short amount of time, but to continue throughout life. And so I've made a promise, and I try and contact every single person that was either baptized or that came back to church in the areas that I served once a month. And it's already yielded incredible results. I've seen a family go through the temple. Going back to my mission this weekend to see another family go through the temple. A few people have already been endowed. Just the follow-up, the continuing to help them endure to the end really has paid off. And that specific family that I felt so impressed to keep in contact with, they've made huge strides in their progression as a family. And I know they'll accept the gospel. It might be 5 years down the road, but I'm patient. I'm willing to help them out until they do. I just want to say that I am so happy for you. You have received a call from the Lord Jesus Christ through an ordained and set apart prophet of God to serve in the Everett, Washington Mission. I would consider you to be one of the luckiest people on this planet. Your mission will mean everything to you if you want it to mean everything to you. The Lord has spent years. I would go as far as to say that He has spent more years than you are in age, preparing people, families, generations for you, for your service, for your testimony, which I hope you have gained. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to gain with stronger conviction. The Lord has called you. He hasn't called Elder X or Sister Z. He's called you for a special purpose, to be a witness of Him and to testify of the truthfulness of the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I can testify with all of my heart that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. That He came in a resurrected form with God the Father to the boy Joseph Smith. The heavens were opened that day, which gave birth to the restoration of the gospel. How blessed are we to access the atonement through saving ordinances which have been restored. You have been called to share that with someone in Washington, and I would go as far and would testify that it's someone's plural, because the Lord wants you to be successful. Pray like you've never prayed before. Trust in Him like you've never trusted in anyone in your entire life. And expect miracles. And go out there and work every day as if you were going to have a miracle that day. And I promise that rain or sunshine, you will see miracles throughout the course of your mission. The Lord, again, He wants you to be successful. I testify of the truthfulness of this work. I am a missionary forever. And I say this in the name of my Savior, my Redeemer, the one who atoned for my sins and allows me to be forgiven and receive of His love, even the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.